It's Tuesday, September 9th, 2025. Trump says this type of bias doesn't get talked about enough. The LA deportations will continue until morale improves. And on the topic of motherhood we talked about yesterday, as I was saying, we'll talk about some new Gen Z polling next on the AM Update. President Trump is using his bully pulpit to illuminate the country as to what happened with that Ukrainian refugee who was violently stabbed to death on a Charlotte, North Carolina train just trying to go home from work. He said in a post on Truth Social yesterday, quote, "I have seen the horrific video of a beautiful young Ukrainian refugee who came to America to escape the vicious war in Ukraine and was innocently riding the metro in Charlotte, North Carolina, where she was brutally ambushed by a mentally deranged lunatic. The perpetrator was a well-known career criminal who had been previously arrested and released on cashless bail in January, a total of 14 times. He went on to say the blood of this innocent woman can literally be seen dripping from the killer's knife, and now her blood is on the hands of the Democrats who refuse to put bad people in jail, including former disgraced governor and wannabe Senator Roy Cooper. North Carolina and every state needs law and order." So there is President Trump using his bully pulpit to help illuminate and just shine a light on what the mainstream media, with very few exceptions, has been trying to ignore, this just harrowing and horrifying story out of North Carolina. Some new details on the stabbing death of Irina Zarutska came out yesterday. You can hear on the videotape the man, the suspect who stabbed Irina, you can hear him say something under his breath in the video that was released. So here he is taking out his knife. He does the business, just the awful, awful business. And then in the aftermath, President Trump's Truth Social post saying you could see the blood dripping from his knife, he says something. You can barely make that out, but he's saying, "I got that white girl," as the blood is dripping from his knife. Just a horrifying thing. 14 priors, and he was out on the street. Anyway, President Trump yesterday spoke at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C.
It's sort of a crazy thing. It's a world gone wrong, just a world gone wrong. And I made the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders. You're going to hate this. Male and female. You're going to hate it.
Nope, we do not hate that. We like it, and we want more of it. Here he is later on in the speech.
And I created the first ever Department of Justice task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias. And for those people that are a little bit naive or not well-read, there is a tremendous anti-Christian bias. We don't hear about it. We don't think about it. You hear about anti-Semitic, but you don't hear about anti-Christian. Now, you have a strong anti-Christian bias, but we're ending that rapidly, I will tell you. It's a whole...
So there's President Trump at the Museum of the Bible yesterday in Washington, D.C. It sounds very subtle and understated there, but this is the quote. "There is tremendous anti-Christian bias. We don't hear about it. You hear about anti-Semitic bias, but you don't hear about anti-Christian bias." For a long time, you weren't allowed to say these two things in the same sentence as President Trump did there. But I'm glad that he's actually doing so, because every bit as much of attention needs to be shed on anti-Christian bias as there is on anti-Semitism, and that's not to diminish anti-Semitism whatsoever. Well, the Trump administration got a big win in court yesterday. The Supreme Court cleared the way for the Trump administration to continue carrying out immigration raids in California after advocacy groups argued that federal authorities were stopping suspected illegal immigrants without a valid reason. The court's decision was 6-3, issued along ideological lines, temporary, while the case proceeds in the U.S. Court of Appeals. It came after a federal judge in July blocked Immigration and Customs Enforcement from conducting raids in Los Angeles County, finding the plaintiffs likely would succeed in their argument that the raids violated the Fourth Amendment. The Ninth Circuit upheld that order, leading the Trump administration to turn to the Supreme Court, where they got that temporary victory yesterday. It's a major victory for the Trump administration as it enacts an aggressive deportation agenda. We talked about those numbers yesterday. Hopefully this will help push those rookie numbers upwards. Speaking of the Supreme Court, Justice Amy Coney Barrett made a very rare media appearance. Here she is talking to CBS News about the Dobbs decision. That was the one that overturned Roe v. Wade.
But, the central message of Dobbs did not render abortion illegal. Dobbs did not say anything about whether abortion is immoral. Dobbs said that these are questions that are left to the states. All of these kinds of questions, decisions that you mentioned that require medical judgments, are not ones that the Constitution commits to the court, to decide how far into pregnancy the right of abortion might extend. The court was in the business of drawing a lot of those lines before. And what Dobbs says is that those calls are properly left to the democratic process. And the states have been working those out. There's been a lot of legislative activity and a lot of state constitutional activity since the decision in Dobbs was rendered.
So from a legal beagle analysis, I'm sure everything that Amy Coney Barrett just said there is right on the money. From just a common sense perspective and an actual constitutional perspective, you do not ever have the right, and it's not left up to the democratic process at all. You never have the right to murder people, and that's what abortion is. So she's dead wrong in terms of the meta picture there. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, amid ongoing, there is some good signs in the economy. There's some mixed signals in the economy. There's some things that are making me squirm a little bit. He was asked to react on NBC News the other day. He was asked to react to a forecast from Goldman Sachs. Here's what he had to say.
Hasbro says they're going to have to increase their prices. Goldman Sachs says 86% of the tariff revenue collected so far has been paid by American businesses and consumers. So just bottom line, Mr. Secretary, do you acknowledge that these tariffs are a tax on American consumers?
No, I don't.
Even though you have companies saying they are going to have to increase prices, and given the fact that 86% of these tariffs so far have been paid by Americans.
You're quoting Goldman Sachs. So
yes, Goldman Sachs, correct. I
made a good career trading against Goldman Sachs.
Dude is feeling himself. He really is. Well, not that way. Feeling himself is in like a basketball player gets on a heat. Well, that's probably not a good. A basketball player gets on a roll. He's feeling himself. That's what I meant. There was a story out yesterday, again, anonymously sourced, that Treasury Secretary Bessent, in a private meeting with top Trump officials in the White House, he got into a little bit of a scuffle, almost got into a scuffle with Bill Pulte, Director of Federal Housing. The quotes coming out of that story are hilarious. And this is like the third or fourth time I've read a report about Scott Bessent nearly coming to blows with people, just calling them out on their BS. At least that's what it appears. Maybe he sucks at everything and he deserves everything that's said about him. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he secretly sucks. But the homosexual in the administration there, probably, it seems as if he has the most testosterone out of anybody not named Donald Trump. Let's go to this. Dr. Scott Gottlieb, former Pfizer dude. I think he served with Pfizer. Former official at the FDA. He was on CNBC the other day to talk about what RFK Jr. is doing at HHS.
What questions is Kennedy raising that are different, you think, than what President Trump raised?
Well, it's not the questions he's raising. It's the instruments he's putting in place to start restricting access to vaccines, getting control of the ACIP committee at CDC. He's going to put on the next agenda the hepatitis B vaccine. We all know. He's looking at MMRV vaccine, trying to obviate use of the MMRV vaccine, which is measles, mumps, rubella, and varicella. I believe he's going to claim in his autism report that there's an association between alum, which is the adjuvant used in most pediatric vaccines, and autism, which is going to set in place a litigation enterprise against the vaccines to potentially bankrupt the vaccine injury compensation program. So that could take down the whole pediatric vaccine enterprise. And
talk to me. There's Dr. Scott Gottlieb, Pfizer hack, former FDA commissioner. And he was on your TV screens a lot during COVID, you'll recall that, saying that RFK Jr., what he's doing, could take down the entire pediatric vaccine enterprise. I wonder why he didn't say industry there. That's interesting. Not to do PTSD for you, but we also have a reprisal from somebody who was on your TV screens a lot during COVID. That would be the lady of the scarf, Dr. Deborah Birx, who continues her contrition, I guess, campaign, we'll call it that.
Well, I think we all know how important the COVID vaccine was.
No.
It was scientifically, critically studied to prevent severe disease. I think where people started to get confused is when we started to make potential claims that the vaccine did more than what it was studied to actually show.
Who made those claims, Debbie? Who made those claims? I like how she uses the pronoun we. We did that. No, you did that. Now, you were part of the we, but don't try to spread the blame around to people you don't see in the same room. Good grief. Well, when we come back, we go down to the state of Arizona, where their just numbskull governor got what was coming to her on a live radio debate the other day. Also, how do you shut down, just got done talking about vaccines, how do you shut down the left's vaccine narrative in about 2.5 minutes? We'll explore that and more next. Katie Hobbs, Arizona governor, what you doing? Here she is debating her Republican rival on KTAR News.
I want to play one more from Robeson. She hits you on the Arizona economy, and I want you to have a chance to say what you think. Here we go.
I think when the voters focus in on the general election, Katie Hobbs is going to have to defend a record that's been disastrous. Just on the economy, for example, we went from number 1 in the nation before she took office to number 47. I mean, it's just been a precipitous decline in job growth and job creation.
1 to 47.
I'm not clear what those numbers are referencing. They could be anything.
You don't know what those numbers are. It's a very specific number. They just said that right to your face. Job growth went from number 1 to number 47. I don't know what that means. It could be anything. It could be a butterfly for all I know. Katie Hobbs, Arizona governor, being played a clip of her Republican opponent for rival. You try to bring facts and figures and receipts, and it's a cult. It's a cult. It could be anything. No, it's a very specific thing. It's not anything. It is this very specific thing, job growth. And now here's this. Florida Surgeon General Joe Ladapo, for reasons, decided to go on Jake Tapper's show on CNN to debate the topic of vaccines. How do you shut down the vaccine narrative from the left in about 2.5 minutes? Listen to this.
You're making a decision that no other Surgeon General in the United States has done. It goes against what's recommended by every top medical organization, including the AMA, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Boston Center on Emerging Infectious Diseases. It goes against what parents in Florida want. 82% of parents in Florida schools said public schools should require vaccines for measles and polio with health and religious exemptions. It goes against what Senator Rick Scott, a Republican from Florida, wants. He thinks sticking with a religious exemption is fine. It goes against the Florida Medical Association, which in the past has backed Governor DeSantis. So all of these people are wrong, and you are right.
Again, sort of casting it in that way is not what I would do. Is not how I look at it.
It's a fact.
You look at the last. I would say what I would say is that, my history, if you will, is I share what I believe is the right thing to do, whether it's popular or not. I've been doing it for years. I certainly did it during the COVID-19 pandemic. I thought that the lockdowns would be harmful. I said that as early as March 2020 after taking care of patients at UCLA Hospital, some of whom had COVID. We as a state and I as an individual recommended against the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines for children, healthy children, very early, 2 years ago or so. And that was the correct decision there. And I've made a series of and I'm not alone. It just so happens that most of the people who, have larger microphones tend to align with the American Medical Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics. But we've been right over and over again because what we've said has been based on data and common sense. In this particular area, this is really just about it's really about ethics. I mean, is it appropriate for a government or any other entity to dictate to you what you should put in your body? No, it's absolutely not appropriate. You have sovereignty over your body. I mean, that's where it starts, and you should be able to decide what you put in your body. And if you can't decide what you put in your body, I mean, what do you actually, what can you decide? So it really is an issue that is in that domain.
So that is Joe Ladapo, Florida Surgeon General, in about 2.5 minutes, completely obliterating the left's narrative on vaccines and what he's doing in Florida by taking away the vaccine requirements for school children. What you just heard there, in short, if I may, is basically Joe Ladapo saying in a very, very nice way, with a smile on his face, Jake Tapper, you wouldn't understand this. I have orders of magnitude more intestinal fortitude than you do. By the way, we have been right about everything. We're probably going to be right about this. And by the way, also, it doesn't matter what all of these medical boards have to say. They're not ethics boards. This is a matter of ethics, not medicine. Not principally about medicine, anyway. And he did it all in a kind of a sing-song voice and a smile on his face. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. As I was saying, yesterday I talked about how if I were king for a day, I'd turn on the propaganda machine regarding motherhood and glorifying motherhood if I wanted to see birth rates turn around. Well, bada bing, bada boom, NBC News has some new polling on Gen Z. Amongst Zoomers who voted for Trump or voted for Kamala. And they did it by sex. Now, of course, the headline is this. The young men who voted for Trump, they were asked, what is your most important definition of success? Number one, amongst young men who voted for Trump, they said having children is their best personal definition of success. Amongst the Zoomers who voted for Trump, the Zoomer men who voted for Trump. Amongst the Zoomer women who voted for Harris, having children was the least important personal definition of success. So that's the headline right there. That's an uh-oh. The number one by a bullet most important definition of success for Zoomer women who voted for Kamala, fulfilling job or career. That was their number one idea of success. Women who voted for Harris. Zoomer women who voted for Harris. But there's also this. Amongst Zoomer women who voted for Trump, having children is right down the middle. It's neither the most important nor the least important thing in terms of personal definition of success. These are the Zoomer women who voted for Trump. Not that important having children. Zoomer men who voted for Kamala, most important thing, fulfilling job or career, having children way down the list. So like I said, if I were king for a day, I would turn on the propaganda machine. Now, you can parse this data from NBC News, this survey from NBC News. You can parse this 6 ways to Sunday. You could probably say something along the lines of, depending on where their headspace was when they took this poll, maybe the Zoomer women who voted for Trump, not being that concerned about having children, maybe they're just trying to be financially independent because they can't find a dude who wants to have children. And so it's important to be financially independent and have a fulfilling career until I find that dude. Maybe that's top of mind right now, and having children is way down the list. Maybe that's the explanation. But I think there's going to need to be, amongst the boomers and now and the Gen X, and especially fathers, if this is anywhere in the realm of accurate regarding our young women, our Zoomer women, what an abject failure. I want to believe it's one of these other parsings if that's even a word. I want to believe it's something else that explains why just kind of the basic facet of civilization, carrying on your bloodline, really, carrying on life, your family, to the next generation, having a next generation. Why, that's just like neither here nor there. Both for women who voted for Trump, young women who voted for Trump, and young women who voted for Harris. It's not even like a factor, according to this survey. I want to believe it's something else. Something else explains this. Other than there's just parents raised another generation of young women who are just, let's face it, devoid of really what life is all about. I hope it's something else. I really do. That's going to do it for a Tuesday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntire, and this is the AM Update.